I think the idea of a smart Caribbean and intelligence services, it's not an option for us. It's an absolute necessity. And many of the challenges that we face as a region can only be overcome through technology. And so it's not an option for us. It's not whether or not, we adopt these technologies. But so many of the challenges that we face as a region can really only be overcome through the adoption of technology.
Minister, given the information that you have on the Smart Caribbean concept, do you think that it could be used as a strategy for sustainable development, especially in the case of Antigua and Barbuda?
Maybe not strategy, Nicola, but what I would say is that I'm happy that it crystallizes the vision of where we are to be approaching, we are to be aiming at, for the simple reason that there are lots and lots and lots of steps that have to be taken in order for the Caribbean to be able to get to that position. But I think the reason why I like this morning's presentations is that it gives to any audience, whether they're just citizens, the regular Joe, or whether or not it's business or any other person who is so engaged this morning, a scope of what technology promises and what it can deliver. Where we are in the Caribbean, and let me speak specifically of Antigua, some of those necessary steps have already been put in place. And we are indeed pursuing that outcome. But what I will emphasize, the reason why I like it is that it excites anyone who is looking at it that, geez, we could become that. So it is what we want to become. The specific steps that are now being undertaken merely focus on A, the legislative framework, and B, the infrastructure, the basic underlying telecommunications infrastructure. I would say C, some degree of automation is taking place in various agencies of the government. And with that automation as well becomes the whole process of digitization, to which I spoke earlier this morning. So once we have completed those processes, the whole question now becomes of how do we integrate it and how do we get it on all information systems speaking to each other to create that seamless environment that we are very much witnesses of this morning. So I think I'm excited about it because it's going to make my work easier, because when I'm now speaking with any particular stakeholder, they would see what it is, the finished product, what it ought to look like. And it makes it easier for them to be able to converse with me in respect of the pieces that I have to put in place.
Clearly, if the Caribbean, with our limited resources, our separated islands, populations, is to progress from where we are today, we have to be smart. We can't achieve the kind of healthcare services, social services, education services, everything that we need to achieve for our populations unless we do it in a smart way. And that's smart both generically and technologically. Fundamentally, we have to maximize to be efficient about the use of our resources. And ICTs and technology provide all of the tools and provide the best way to do that. If you connect people, the Bahamas in particular is a very good example of why this is necessary, because the Bahamas itself is an archipelago with 19 populated islands. It is impossible to provide full education and health services on many of the islands, and it's only through technology that we are able to reach those populations and to keep that country as a unit. You expand that same principle to the Caribbean as a region. And if we want to truly call ourselves a Caribbean, if we want to be a region, I don't know that we're ever going to be an EU region or anything, but fundamentally, if we're really serious about Caribbean integration, technology is the best way to do that. And through smart cities, smart populations, and living smart.
There's a lot of moving parts involved in a smart city or smart nation, as we've already heard. And part of the success of this requires top-down leadership. So you've got to have leadership with a compelling vision of what a smart city and smart nation is going to look like, so you can get the ball rolling, you can get funds allocated, you can get things moving.
How do you feel about a smart Caribbean?
Well, I think that's going to be very interesting. It's going to take a lot of work because, as you know, we are so fragmented. But it is going to make us more productive, and I suspect we are going to be able to develop faster if we can look towards a smart Caribbean, because I know it's not going to happen very, very soon, but hopefully it is going to happen at some point.
Garfield Gary Sinclair is president of the Caribbean for Cable and Wireless Communications, C&W, responsible for operations in 15 territories across the region, including C&W's Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados markets.
First thing I want to impress on you, though, is that today, cable and wireless is much more than your grandmother's old landline company, like it used to be. After multiple mergers, divestments, acquisitions, being acquired itself, we are now part of the world's largest broadband and entertainment organization.
What I think we have to look forward to is, truly connected communities, truly digital societies, where machines talk to machines. Your, for instance, fridge at home talks to your grocer, tells them you're low on milk, low on fruits, and your milk and fruit show up from your grocer the next day at your door, paid for, covered, and that is the kind of connectivity that we're talking about. Security apparatus set up and established to know exactly what to do, what lights to turn off and on, what doors to close when or not, so you can just walk out of your house, among other things. We really want to create a digital society. We don't see why the Caribbean has to take a back seat to anywhere else in the so-called developed world, because we've invested in the infrastructure right here in this region to deliver first world services to our Caribbean people. The challenge is that we're not using the technology.
And that's going to be my question. How satisfied are you from a C&W perspective in terms of the IT infrastructure in the region? Yes, there's no reason why we should not be at the top of our game in terms of the first world countries, but there are a lot of agencies and a lot of territories within the region that are still very much analog. How are we going to jump from that to digital in order to stay in the game?
Well, the areas that may still be analog, we are working hard to convert them to digital platforms and technologies. But look, we have digital platforms and technologies in the vast majority of our territories across the region. The challenge is we're not using them. Our populations, our consumers are not using digital technology enough, and certainly not to the degree that they're being used by our first world developed country counterparts. And our labor productivity and our efficiency as economies is being hugely impeded by the fact that we remain so manual.
Is it that we're afraid of change? We're afraid to move forward?
Part of it's an education issue.
Yes.
Part of it is a sort of inertia and unwillingness to sort of change. And for instance, we have payment kiosks now in a lot of our retail stores and outlets right across the region. And to get customers to use the payment machines is difficult. They'd rather stand in line and pay, exactly. They'd rather stand in line and pay that check and get that receipt and talk to somebody than just go to a payment kiosk, take care of it and be out again. So it's an education issue, it's a familiarity issue. I think we will change it. I think, we're going to evolve eventually, but we're not moving fast enough, and we're getting held back, and we're falling behind our more developed country counterparts because we're not adopting the technologies that are here. I'm not talking about future stuff that's here. We're not availing ourselves of them enough.
That term that we use, smart, it is the vision of development that is enabled by information and communication technologies and the Internet of Things. It's a convergence of the power of technologies that will create opportunities to do things differently and to transform every area of endeavor, from governments down to the man on the street.
Do you think the concept of a smart Caribbean could be used as a strategy for sustainable development?
Absolutely. It has to be part of our strategy for sustainable development. We are in an age of rapid technological innovation, and you are seeing the changes in how we live and how we work at a very fundamental level. Unfortunately, we are consumers of the technology, and we need to move from that position of just consuming to creating. But one of the challenges I think that we face is that we do not believe in our own capabilities. We have the intellectual capacity. Why haven't we used it to create new types of business, to capitalize on the potential of the technology that is readily available? And I think it has to do with our mindset and how we view ourselves. And I think our greatest challenge at this time is overcoming those mindsets that keep us boxed into a framework that doesn't have to be there, that is not there, but it is really, we are boxed in by our minds. And if we could just use our imagination and believe in the power of our own ideas and our thoughts, that would help tremendously.
Let's talk a little bit about the challenges. We have so many institutions within the region still using an analog system. We're looking at digital, and I'm not sure how long that's going to take before we actually get a full changeover. But let's say, for instance, in Antigua and Barbuda, how long do you think that changeover will take from analog to fully digital?
It will take some time, but we need to start somewhere. Our citizens, particularly young people, for the most part, are already digital. They are digital citizens. It's people like me and you who might take a little more time in embracing the digital environment. I mean, digital is everywhere. And so it requires digital thinking everywhere. And it's now no longer something that is simply in the domain of technocrats and telecoms operators. It's a lifestyle. And so digital it's already everywhere, and it's only going to spread, it's only going to grow, and the sooner we embrace it, then the better.
Let me bring it down to the average Joe. We're talking about the technological aspect, the infrastructure aspect, but what about getting everyone, citizen Antigua Barbuda, citizen Caribbean, digital ready? We have a generation, perhaps those 60 and over, who are, I wouldn't say afraid, but they're not of that smartphone capability or the internet capability, or just, sort of gelling with what's happening the times. And are you in a position, or is your government in a position to sort of integrate senior citizens to be, let's just say, digital ready or digital capable?
I think the solution to it is to have a hybrid response to it.
Yes.
They're not going to all come along. Even earlier last week, or late last week, I received a diplomatic visit from the High Commission from the country of Georgia, and where they have adopted some of this technology as well. I've been in regional and international forums with senior people in IT from the country of Estonia. And even today it was mentioned that there are places where the government has to engage its citizens. So even as it provides a digital platform for citizen engagement, for the more technology-phobic areas of the societies, the older folks, who are not likely to become digital citizens overnight, there still has to be a means by which we engage them. And I think the words that we use in technologies now is clicks and bricks. So we have the clicks for the new digital citizens, and we have to maintain some bricks for the older citizens. And I think those types of citizen engagement centers present themselves, that we can do the automation. We still have a people interface for persons who are from the brick environment, but we still have a people interface, but it does interface with a digital environment. I would say, as one noted revolutionary had said, Martin Luther King, that sometimes we're running to catch up with our people. And I think the pace at where we're at right now, we indeed, Caribbean governments, are running to catch up with the new digital citizens, the millennial citizens in our country. They are very ready. Yes. They're utilizing technology at a much faster rate than we can keep up with them. So it is really for us, in terms of the services that the government is providing, to catch up with the citizenry who are already adopting and using technology from 2 years old.
The ultimate objective here is to produce smarter services for people. that serve governments, the citizens themselves, and help the economy. And then the things that enable that are really the information and the infrastructure down below, which is where I'm going to spend most of my time. And it's, as it shows here, it's really about applications that increasingly run on the cloud, and then a national broadband network or some other kind of a broadband network that covers all the geography that you need. Now at the bottom here we see enablers of all this. It's important to have the right kind of talent, technology, regulatory and environment, and investment. And really the two ends of this should probably be arrows that go both ways, because the smart cities and smart nations are going to improve the talents of the citizens, and also provide a better basis for more investment in improving the economy. And so it's a virtuous cycle, as they say.
One of the critical things, or in fact in many ways the first critical thing, is that as a region, from a policy level, at a very high level, we have to make that decision that that's where we're going. And if we do that, the next step obviously is the resources to actually do it. Now, we are not China, but not the whole of China isn't smart yet. They're still working on it. They're still working one step at a time. We have to identify what our current situation is. Currently, we have good communications throughout the region. Good, middling to good. We have a reasonable number of cables that connect us as countries. But the next step really is, firstly, to have a vision, a single vision for how a smart Caribbean looks. What is a smart Caribbean? You're in Trinidad, I'm in the Bahamas, we have people throughout on all the islands. And what do we all see as that thing that, as that picture of what our lives would be like in a smart Caribbean before we can decide how we're going to make it work? The technologies are there. I mean, we're sitting, as you say, we're in a room full of all of the fantastic technologies that impact us. Smart tourism, smart everything. You can go smart on anything that you can think of that's a benefit or a thing that a government provides to its people. We can make it smart. It takes money, and the priorities of each island are very different. As you mentioned, I'm Trinidadian / Bahamian, so I have two completely different perspectives on it. And certainly the priorities in Trinidad are going to be very different from the priorities in the Bahamas. But how do we as a region decide where we put those priorities and in what order is the next step? And that's where the work the CTU is doing, with the help of international agencies and business. So Huawei is a very interesting potential partner for the region. We have to be careful not to get too committed to any one thing, but we have to figure out exactly. So we have to figure out what we want first, because we can't let the market tell us where we want to go. We have to decide where we want to go. We have to get that vision, and that's where our policymakers have to really jump on board and say, you know what, we're on board, we are part of this, and we're ready to go.
Regional integration from an ICT perspective, and given an ICT infrastructure, do you think governments are close, or are we any closer to coming together as a body, CARICOM, the other agencies, to ensure that we make that leap from where we are now to?
We may not yet get to the point where politically,
yes,
each of us in our own microstates are prepared to give up our sovereignty. But what I can say to you, ICT is going to allow businesses to traverse these countries borderless, in a borderless fashion. And as the information technology becomes more adopted and more pronounced, businesses are going to be able to scale across this region seamlessly. And I think when that happens, and with already the commitment that is made for the free flow of capital, the free flow of labor, I think integration will come. The political integration and the relinquishing of sovereignty is going to be an event that teaches us in the hour. I can't speak to that yet.
For example, instead of having each department in a country need to have its own ICT organization, its own facilities, its own everything, the increasing use of multi-tenant ICT capabilities allows these organizations to maybe share an infrastructure which is much more efficient, much less expensive, much more cost-effective, and not even really know it. In other words, the infrastructure is segmented in a way that they all feel like they have their own and yet you get the benefits of this centralization and scale.
If it is a regional effort, it is going to happen sooner, because as you know, when one community in the region starts something and we see that it is progressing successfully, the others usually jump on board. So it is going to happen faster if we go with, from one island to the next. I believe Antigua is quite advanced right now, because I was informed of their surveillance system, which is something that I really recommend in the other Caribbean islands, especially St. Lucia, where we have so many issues with crime right now. I think that would really come in handy. So there are certain areas that I can see. These areas are going to grow with leaps and bounds, whereas other areas it may not grow as quickly. I think in the healthcare sector and in the crime sector, investigations and so on, it can really create there is a lot of potential for us to use ICT to really accomplish some of the objectives that we have planned for those countries. But in other areas, it might be a little bit slower.
Do we need to jump at government, regional agencies and say to them, hey, you step up the game, we will work with you, and that's the only way we can move forward?
It's got to be a public-private partnership, for sure. We got to start, good point, we have to start with government services. I think governments need to mandate that the only way to interact with us, the only way to pay your taxes, the only way to apply for permits is electronically. What we found in Jamaica, for instance, the U.S. Embassy, very popular place for Jamaicans to apply for that almighty U.S. visa. A very, very popular activity amongst Jamaicans, and I suspect throughout the Caribbean. When the U.S. Embassy moved to electronic filing and applications for visa, you had to do it. And the entire population, so there was no reduction in demand for U.S. visas when the U.S. went to a completely e-application model. And I think government's going to have to lead the way in ensuring that we adopt more of an e-model by making the services they provide mandatorily provided electronically. And business can help that way as well, ensuring that we move our way along the digital divide.
What are your expectations coming out of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, this symposium?
Well, the main objective of this week really was to educate. It's just to build an awareness, particularly for decision makers, for policy makers, so that they're aware of what is available and what some of the options are, and how these technologies can be applied in a Caribbean context. And so I am glad that we had an opportunity to be host of this event, and we're glad that we were able to bring Huawei here as well, and you guys have demonstrated Huawei have demonstrated in real, in a real way what is possible. So we're really thankful for that.
What I expect is that the people who put this together today, that they are going to continue creating awareness in the Caribbean, sensitizing other Caribbean islands as well. And I was told that all the other utility providers, that is telecommunications providers, are on board. And I am hoping that they will be able to work together to really sensitize the people on what ICT can do for them. Because as long as you have buy-in, and I know that the Caribbean people, especially the youth, they are very, very interested in technology. So I'm hoping that, we are really going to see this moving on very quickly.
The main purpose is to make people aware of the phenomenal changes that are taking place in the industry and the opportunities they present. But more than that, we want to galvanize action. We're wonderful talkers, yes? And yes, wonderful talkers, but we've reached a stage we have no more talking to do. Yes, it's time for action. And the heads of, as I mentioned earlier, the heads of CARICOM governments, they approved the roadmap for the Single ICT Space. Yes? The smart concept is going to make a great contribution to the realization of that space. But people have to be made aware. People have to understand. The decision makers have to appreciate, this is potentially where we can go and what we can do, and then they have to act. You know, move beyond the old talk and get with it, right? And I don't think money, or the lack thereof, is an excuse for not getting on with it, because the longest journey starts with a step, yes? And the other thing is that we may not have money, but we could think. How do we make use of the resources that we already have? How do we leverage what we have in our hands to get going? And these are things I don't think, I've seen it too many times. When you put a plan forward, the first thing, who's going to fund this?
That's always the first.
That's the default. That's the default question. And I don't think it has to be that way. We can start, even with the smallest thing, do it well, demonstrate that it works. And you'd be surprised, success, it brings more success. People want to be part of something that is positive and working and making a difference.
As you know, we are gold sponsors of this conference here this year, and we've been partners with the CTU forever. We are integrally involved with the telecommunications development in this region. We're inextricably bound. You can't separate cable and wireless from telecommunications, and telecommunications development, which is what the CTU is dedicated to in this region. We've been here well over 100 years. We're going to be here for another 100 years. Yeah, man, yeah. Yeah, we're going to be here for another 100 years to come. And so organizations and bodies like the CTU are integral to assisting us with precisely the kind of development and the kind of evolution we want to take our Caribbean people through, and we're going to be there with them step by step, shoulder to shoulder. We're sponsors of all kinds of CTU programs in order to foster the kind of development of the telecommunications infrastructure in the region, and we're going to continue to partner with them going forward. We look forward to their promulgation of the various programs that they do in order to educate our people about what cutting edge technology is all about. It was interesting, for instance, to hear the debate today about cryptocurrency technology and the fact that we're having these sophisticated debates about what are highly sophisticated technologies right here in the region, and to hear about the leadership being exhibited by our Barbadian brothers and entrepreneurs in this space. And that's where we live. I mentioned in my discussion earlier that we have 80,000 kilometers of both wet and dry fiber infrastructure. And that is the platform on which all of the innovation in this region traverses. So we have a vested interest in partnering with the CTU and Cantor and all of the other institutions and agencies that are about promoting the advancement of telecommunications. Like I said, we've been doing it 100 years, and we plan to keep doing it for another 100 years.